Hi everyone, thank you for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, I really appreciate it. Thank you. As you probably already know, Jim Comey, the ex-FBI director back in the George W. Bush years as well as the Obama years up to 2016 when he became involved in major controversy around the election and then was subsequently fired in 2017 by Donald Trump, who now got involved in a pretty major way to try to punish him. He was tweeting constantly about how he should be prosecuted. And although most serious lawyers, including lawyers appointed by him, didn't want to do it because there's no evidence, there's no good evidence at all to charge him with anything, nevertheless, someone was found to do the dirty deed. And so now he is facing 2 charges for which in theory, he could end up in prison, but this is very unlikely because of the weakness of the charges, in addition to the fact that all the constant attacks from Trump in public through all that tweeting that he's been doing gave a defense lawyer a pretty good case to get the case dismissed. And so in looking at his chart, by the way, this chart that I'm showing is an attempt at a rectification for which really I would need more evidence than what I'm presenting here. But there are some pretty good reflections. For example, that it puts the moon in Scorpio. He would have his moon in Libra if he is born from 0 a.m. all the way to about 8 a.m. After that, it's in Scorpio. And the early degrees of Scorpio would mean Pluto right now is squaring it from Aquarius, and this would make a lot of sense in terms of being charged, since the moon would be in the 9th house of legal matters. And there are pretty good reflections in this chart to the events of 2016 and 17 as well, most notably, for example, the fact that Saturn was going through his 10th of career when it connected with his sun. He was fired, and this can happen quite frequently with Saturn going through the 10th, even if as many times as people crash and burn at that point. Saturn goes through there every 30 years. It's the peak of career, but it didn't work out like that for Kevin McCarthy. It didn't work out like that for Al Gore, for someone like Hitler, although that was really the end in that sense. Even Kamala Harris didn't do well with Saturn up there at the top of the chart. And then there are lots of cases where it represents a much more positive peak of career for an individual. But unfortunately for Comey, it was, or it could have been, if this were the chart, the end of his career. Also Neptune going through his ascendant for the media celebrity he was going through at that time. And the general sense of the chart reflecting really amounts to a kind of Boy Scout nature. It's remarkable that he's being charged with anything, because this guy, if anything, is honest to a fault, to the point that you almost think maybe that isn't, being so prim and proper. It may not be the best quality in an FBI director. On the other hand, it's much, much better than having a potential world-class crook like Kash Patel leading the FBI. But anyway, that's another discussion. The point is, though, that the chart, even irrespective of time, does reflect many of the events he lived through, reflects the situation now as well. And there are links to Trump that are pretty obvious, such as when you look at the Capricorn planets opposite the Cancer planets, square Eris, all of that energy links to Trump's infamous Access Hollywood T-square, which is the area that is most difficult and most dangerous to him. The other factor would be that having a 23 or so degree Sagittarius sun puts it precisely opposite Trump's sun, which is one of the ways a polarity like that can manifest, even if there are cases where people like that with those opposite suns do often get together because there is a polarity agreement, but polarities can go completely wrong, and oppositions ultimately mean I'm opposite you, and so then that can generate problems. Now, in terms of what is coming up, even if I said, to me, the charging and the charges seem completely preposterous and very unlikely to go anywhere. The one thing where this is almost certain to hurt Comey is in the sense that these types of assaults, be they appropriate or inappropriate as this one is, tend to cost the person a lot of money. And from what I researched, usually anywhere between $250,000 to as much as $1 million or more, depending on how long the situation goes. And there are problems in the chart here because you've got the Pluto, no matter what time he's born, that Venus will be in the 5-degree Aquarius range. And so Pluto is headed toward conjoining that. That has two sides, potentially very good because it could elevate his energy a whole lot if things turn out well. And for that, he has to surmount the problem that could develop from the Cancer and Aries planets, the very same planets that align him to be a problem for Trump, also become vulnerabilities next year as Saturn transits through Aries and at minimum will square the Jupiter and the Mars pretty directly next year. So that could extend things and make things hard for him. But on the other hand, if it turns out relatively well, meaning the case is dismissed, that kind of energy could also reflect the fact that this will turn out to be a huge mistake for Trump in that, as he's prone to do, he elevates people by attempting to punish them, such as what happened with Jimmy Kimmel. He creates this furor around Kimmel's show. Initially, they stop the show, then they bring him back. Kimmel is doing better now than he was doing before as a result of Trump's attack. In other words, you're creating martyrs when you approach the situation in this way. And this is something that is entirely possible with this chart as well, because yes, Saturn will be challenging some planets, but then from the other side, it is trining his Mercury, it's trining his Sun, and although that's more in 2027, Mercury is the one that is more involved in 2026. So this, therefore, becomes the kind of chart where we have to wait a little longer to see how it goes. For example, one possibility is that it could be dismissed very quickly, and then that would imply certain things. If it starts to go longer, then it does get more complicated for Comey. But if you asked me to project and predict, my sense is that the greater odds are that this turns out to be a big mistake for Trump, much like it was to attack and accost Jimmy Kimmel, because of the way our media environment is, our legal environment. When you do this kind of thing, you tend to elevate the person. And I heard a commentary that was fascinating in that sense, where the person was saying Trump should have learned this lesson because he himself seems to have benefited from the fact that many of his supporters were very upset that he had been charged, and so they rise to his defense. And now, in the current environment, the same thing is very likely to happen with Comey, especially because already Trump is way underwater in his approval. It's approaching a 60-40 pattern where 60% are against him. And so then those people are much more likely to take Comey's side and listen to Comey more. In other words, he can become another media person that will constantly irritate Trump as a result of this attack. Bottom line on that, time will tell, but I think it's yet another point of interest that we can keep an eye on as we go toward the late months of 2025 and then into 2026.